I think it is. Are we live? What's happening, everybody? Everybody's having a fantastic, whatever day you're watching this. So you can tell by the thumbnail for this one, I'm in the middle of doing a thing. And that a thing that I am doing is replacing this. This is that old, remember long and forever ago, I did a video. I don't even know if it's still in there. I did a video about the Reich thermostat, and you know what's funny is that they don't even make this anymore, strangely enough. And anyway, this thing was starting to give me some problems, and the problems that it was giving me was kind of an odd thing, and it actually gave me a big problem. This is something I don't think, maybe I've mentioned it a couple of times, but it actually flared up when I made the record-setting hit, if you can believe that. So let's get into this. So back in the day, Reich offered up a thermostat that was 170 degrees, and it was relatively expensive. And if you're comparing it with a stock thermostat, by the way, the differences are pretty obvious once you start checking them out. There it is from the side view. There it is from the front view. Same diameter and everything, but as you can see, significantly different pieces. By the way, this is a stock piece. This would be a Motorrad aftermarket. And if I'm just sitting here holding these, it's practically impossible to tell the difference. Little clicker up here on the stock one, always remove mine, but there you go. Anyway, I've got this extra one mainly because this is what kind of a nerd I am. I actually bought two of these, and what I will typically do with mine, and it's odd that I didn't do it with this one here, is I'll typically drill 2 or 3 holes here right in the center, and that allows coolant to just bypass the mechanism. And what it'll do in a lot of cases is it'll keep it from thermal shocking in some cars. Anyway, it just allows some coolant to flow through. And what I was doing is I was seeing where I could mark this one on the outside. I was trying to cheat this one a little bit because I've never done it before. Figured I'd give it a go. Anyway, that's what the stock thermostats look like. They're basically the same thing. By the way, if you need part numbers, if you're thinking about swapping out thermostats, your Duralast part number, by the way, both of these are made by Motorrad. They're the exact same part, no different at all. So your Duralast, which you get these at like O'Reilly's, I think AutoZone, you're around the corner has it. There you go. If it'll focus. Are you focusing? Part number 41680 for your Duralast, and for your CarQuest, part number is 48798. It's the exact same thermostat. In fact, let me show you guys something fun. Peel this back. You can see that right there. This thing will focus. Motorrad. Right there on the housing. So anyway, they're both made by Motorrad. I have yet to have an issue with one of these Motorrad made. If I get this thing back on here, doesn't matter. I've never had an issue with one of these, but the Reich did give me a fit. So let me walk you through what was going on with the Reich and explain to you what had happened during that record-setting run where the car got to 228 degrees. So what was happening with the Reich, and again, this is that they don't make it anymore. This is out of production. What was happening is that this thing would have a hard time maintaining temperature with my car. It was weird. It would cycle through 194 degrees down to like 180 degrees. Strangely enough, by the way, the gauge in my car will not read under 185 degrees once I've established a temperature with it. In other words, if I'm cruising down the highway and the temperature were less than 185, you wouldn't see that on the gauge. But the tattletale is the oil temperature gauge will show lower. And Anyway, so just kind of an FYI, but getting back to it, the car would cycle back and forth. And if you put load on the car, obviously that generates heat. But the issue that the thermostat was having is that it would just not open. It was like it was shock opening. And one of the other issues that I ran into in my car, speaking of shock, is there's a phenomenon, and you get a lot of this with aviation techs. And it's controlling temperature in aviation is extremely important, and it can make the difference between an engine lifespan being half of what it is. It's called thermal shocking, and what it is basically a situation where you go from a hot engine to a very cold engine, and that can happen for a number of reasons. Well, one of the weird things is this thing would get up to 196, and then it would just start, no, I'm sorry, it would get up to 205. And then it's like it took that much temperature to open that other thermostat, and then it would start hemorrhaging temperature really quickly. In other words, it was going from 205 degrees, and then the thermostat would just pop open, flooding the engine with a bunch of relatively cold water at whatever the ambient temperature happened to have been. So not ideal at all. That can actually, over time, do some damage to an engine. So wanted to get rid of that situation relatively quickly, and went with, it doesn't really matter, but I ended up going, my O'Reilly's was out of stock, so I ran over to my Advanced Auto Parts and picked up what is in essence the exact same car part number for my car, CarQuest. And again, that's the part number of the one that's in my car, 48798. Did I read that right? Yeah, 48798. So that's what I'm up to. Now, the funny thing about it is that when I set the record with my car, that thermostat, by the way, didn't want to open. In fact, it didn't open until I was on the return road. And so that's when I knew I had a fairly significant problem on my hands with that thing, and I was going to have to get rid of it and pull that thing out of the car quick. So that's what I did. But other than that, the car is doing great. It's fun just enjoying the thing as a car. Like, I don't have to, there's no pretense about it. I just get in it. The car is now an entertainment generating appliance for me. It's just so much fun to drive. And the funny thing too is, I don't know if you can hear that one. Somebody's heading out to Velocito. One of the more fun things though is not just the car, but the truck too. Been having a lot of fun. Just kind of wrapping up the tune with that thing. And I got to tell you guys, man, Stormy is doing really well. That truck scoots now. I am, with the 355 gears, I've also made other changes to the tune. And what's funny is that, do you guys remember I was saying, look, 392 gears, they're a lot of fun, just driving the thing around, but you can't really launch the truck. The cool thing about 355s is that you can kind of play in both worlds with those gears. And what I mean by that is if I have half a tank or really like a third of a tank in that truck, I can still launch it with 355 gears. Half a tank, I can really get moving with that truck. But anything less than that, and it just tries to light the tires up. In much the same way that the 392 gear trucks always try to seemingly light the tires up. So anyway, kind of a fun fact, with hardly any gas in the tank, I was trying to cheat a number out of it, and it was not going to happen. I'd start rolling into the throttle, and it would immediately flash the tach over, and it'd pull a quick shift, a short shift really fast at 4,000 RPM. So, but let me check in with you guys real quick. Itch is in, top of the afternoon to you, my friend. Sovereign is in. What part of the world are you in where it's the afternoon? Ryan, hey, what's up? Joseph saying, hey, B. What the hell flew in my mouth? Joey Dyson and said, what up, B Mason? Got you. What's happening, buddy? Chuck Rice, what's up, my brother? Saying hello. Sovereign is in. Ryan is in. What's going on? Jebediah saying out with Sovereign. Chuck's, I post a new video of me and my scat on my channel. Check out Evening Cruise. Check out Chuck's channel, guys. Got a gorgeous scat pack. But check that out. CryptoCat, cool live stream. Thank you very much. Appreciate the kind words. So I'm saying, hey, Jeb. Gary Payne, what's up? Saying, hello, everyone. What's up, GP? Ryan is in saying, dual elastic AutoZone brand, at least here in Missouri. Yeah, so the Duralast, there's all kinds of these brands, but if you look at the actual body of the thing, oh, that's the stock one. They're so hard to tell the difference. It will actually read the one that you want. The one that I've always found works really well is the one that reads Motorad right there. Also, what I do with mine is you got the little clinker right there. Always remove that. And, you know, some of the stock variants have got the rubber in here and all of that. The aftermarket doesn't have any of that nonsense. What I'll typically do is I'll drill a couple of the smaller holes. In fact, that's the size that you need. I'm not sure what size this thing is. What is this size anyway? Does this have a size? I don't think this thing has a size on it. It's an 1/8 inch. So little 1/8 inch hole. That's what size that little burp deal is in there. That is, and I can tell you because that's what that hole is right there. That's an 1/8 of an inch. You can see it sticking through there. So anyway, I'll typically knock out a couple of more holes on the inside. What I was looking for is I wanted to see if I could cheat and run some on the outside too. The problem is that the mounting flange is just, it's inside a little bit too much, so you can't really cheat those on the outside, only on the inside. You got to make sure you don't, end up wiping out part of the inside of that thing. But anyway, that's what I was up to, and can't do it because of the flange. Thought that I could. Thought that I had found a fun cheat code, but didn't. Anyway, that's what I'm typically up to with that, but that's what that little guy is right there. Water comes in from this direction here, so it would actually plug that up. And I always like to have some flow even when the thermostat's not open. But hopefully that helps you guys out with what I am up to in the garage, in the shop, I should say, right now. And one of the weird issues that I've had with thermostats, or the weird issues that other folks have had with thermostats that I've never had. Ardell's in. What's up? Sovereign's on the phone watching. Gary saying, how's the Mopar crew today? Everybody, I think, is doing all right. X is in. What's up, man? Got the flex? Chuck saying, cheers. I like it. Bottoms up. No, average RT is in. Joseph saying 392 NA 2017 Scatty with GT cold air saying, thinking about MMX throttle bodies and porting the intake street use. I expect modest horsepower but snappier throttle. Thoughts or thermostat? Okay, so here's the thing: you're going to have a tune if you're going to run a thermostat. You will eventually get the P0128 code if you don't. Now, as far as throttle bodies and intake manifolds, I've ported, I don't even know, I can't even count how many 392 intake manifolds that I've ported. Matter of fact, my whole kit for porting is literally right just outside of view over here. So here's the thing. Every one of those intake manifolds is different. Some of them are really clean, and porting doesn't do you any good at all. Others are in terrible shape, and they kind of need to be cleaned up. And those, when you actually put some work into them, flow better than the stock manifold. So go figure. It's one of those things where some of them pick up, some of them don't. Also, here's the thing. 392 manifolds, one of the reasons why I don't port manifolds anymore is because I do, but I don't. Okay, so here's the thing. The 392 on the throat of the manifold, I don't have one here to show you, but one of the issues that you run into with those manifolds is that they're a bit choked down, and the idea when you're porting one of those manifolds is you really are resculpting and reshaping up in that manifold. But I've had to backfill the manifold, and I even got into the habit for a while where I would backfill the manifold with epoxy, and then I would port it afterwards. for two reasons. One, the extra mass back there helps to absorb some of the heat from porting. But the other thing is that the castings vary from manifold to manifold to manifold to manifold. So where I might have a casting that is, I could have a casting that's a third of the thickness from one to the next in certain spots. And if it happens to be in a pinch point, I end up cooking through that manifold. So, I mean, yeah, there are some gains, but there's not a lot. There really isn't. I mean, the best throttle body for a stock 392, or really for any of the 392s, is the Fastman 84 millimeter. But I would only pair that with a ported throttle body. That's really the only way I would pair that thing up, because honestly, that manifold isn't going to flow more than what the 80 millimeter that's sitting in front of it will offer it anyway. Unless I get in there and I do some extremely careful reshaping of that throat. And I mean, we were setting, you got to remember, guys, we were going 1120s with untouched 392 manifolds. I went 1130s with my cleaned up manifold and a stock throttle body, of course, stock cam and all of that. This is with 20-inch full weight, the whole bit. I was actually, back then, I was pretty militant about keeping everything extremely factory, like factory full weight. Gary, thank you very much, man. I appreciate that. Very generous of you, man. Thank you for the super chat. So I can actually send you a picture of both to see the difference. Joseph B. finally got home and car out of storage. Mods are included, including your ported intake. Man, she looks mean. Absolutely. So Gary, I think you got one of my, didn't you get one of my last intakes? You may have gotten one of the last intakes that I did. Oh, Joe, wait, hold on. Let me see something here. Oh, Gary's saying go Fastman intake ported MMX. So here's the thing. Like I say, yeah, Gary did get the last one. Gary's actually has a lot of work done to it. That manifold, dude, Gary, what's funny, so some of these kind of blend together. I put the way that I reshape and the way that I port those manifolds is it takes a significant amount of time. And Gary's, I kind of remember that manifold a little bit because that one I had to take off. Hang on, let me get something real quick. Hang on, y'all. So whenever I'm porting one of those manifolds, I'll typically port it to match an 85 millimeter throttle body. And what I do is I actually just put the thing on there and I'll mark it. That's why you see a bunch of like just red stuff still in here. I'll actually go through and I'm dabbing with, it could be a magic marker, a Sharpie or whatever, and I'm marking everything. And I actually go in and I will, man, it'd be cool if I had one here. I can show you the process. I'll actually take a Sharpie. I've got a ton of them over here. And I will kind of swirl that Sharpie in there and I use it as a guide. And as I'm going through and I'm cutting, like with Gary's manifold, I had to cut. So this thing sits on the car, basically, whatever. Where the manifold it kind of turns, comes down and up and around this way. I had to cut off of his, yeah, because I think Gary did get my last one. I've got a ruler here. I'm trying to remember. I ended up cutting probably this is a lot of material, by the way, over 1/8 of an inch of material out of the short side radius of that curve. That's how far off that manifold was. And what was weird about that one is that one had an abnormally thick casting in the plastic. So subsequent manifolds that I had done since then had a very thin casting to it. But to get Gary's to where it would match up to, the throttle body, I had an extra at least hour and a half just smoothing the thing, getting it to where it would actually transition into the plenum. That manifold was weird. But you run into those every once in a while, and you don't really, you're not paying attention to the time. Like, you're not thinking, oh my God, I'm paying attention. It's just, you happen to look up and it's been more time, and because you end up zoning out. It's really zen. When I get started on manifolds and stuff like that, it's real zen. I go into this like super chill mode, and I just end up, I knock it out, and it's all kind of cool. But yeah, Gary's there was a lot. So that's what I'm kind of getting at. If you go with a manifold that's been ported, there will be some modest gains, but the Fastman throttle body with the ported manifold, I've seen as much as 13 horsepower. And that was with my car. And one of the funny things about that is that you got to remember that manifold was so bad from the factory. It was core shifted. It was core shifted lid to the back, if you will. So if this is where the throttle body is, the manifold's a 3-piece unit. The one that was on my car, the lid and the middle part were actually shifted back, and it had gaps in the runners themselves. It was really wonky looking, but what ended up happening was it was a thick casting, like a real thick casting. And I was able to, and I kid you not, with that manifold, I was able to open it up so much you could stick your fist through it. It was anyway, that manifold left with Quick Brick's car, and I really should have kept that manifold, and I did have to backfill that one. But man, I just was like, how far can I take it? And that car ended up running full weight on a drag pack, 1120 at 121 with a small cam in it on the 85. Bunch of bolt-ons. We have to remember that car weighed 4,650 pounds going down the track, which, to give you guys an idea, that's over 200 pounds heavier than my Hellcat is going down the track, and it still managed to run 1120s. I ran an 1130 in that car. But thank you very much, Gary. I appreciate it. But yeah, Gary's had a lot of work done to his. But thank you very much, man. I appreciate that. Hang on just a second. Man, I really do thank you for that. Let's see. But thermostat, yes, you will need a tune, because you will get a P0128 code. I think it's a 128. Isn't it 128? Golly, it's been a hot minute since I even had it pop up. Catalyst got the paw prints. I like it. Chuck saying, the only mod I would do to my Scout would be a cat back. Which system do you think would sound mean without killing small animals at 50 yards? Chuck, I got to tell you something, brother. The problem that you have with your car is that it has already got a really good cat back on it. If you were going to go a different route, there's two different ways that I would go. A lot of guys like to do the mid-muffler delete or the resonator delete. I like the resonator delete because it just looks good, because you don't see the resonator hanging out from underneath the car, but I'm the only person that sees that thing. So there's that. If I'm going to be spending money on anything, though, I would not suggest, or if you're going to be spending money on this, I wouldn't suggest putting the resonator delete on the car. And the reason why I wouldn't is because if you do it wrong, you can kill power with it. I did an install video with the Pipes resonator delete kit. And I can tell you that after I was installing it, I thought, man, if the wrong guy were ever to get his hands on this thing, you could actually, you could hurt the car. So if it's my car, check out Borla, because Borla always sounds amazing. MagnaFlow is going to sound about like what your car sounds like now, but a little bit deeper, because in essence, your car has a MagnaFlow exhaust on it from the factory with a set of resonators. But check out the Borla. I have been continuously I've been continuously impressed by how well Borla sounds and how well they fit. So that would be my 2 cents on that one. Joseph, thank you very much. Saying, thanks, B. That's what I'm thinking. Matching throttle body to the manifold. Both are unique pieces that should be machine fitted. Tune is next year. So here's the thing. Yeah, you want, another top tip when you get your parts back. By the way, Fastman, tell him I sent you. I don't know if he'll give you a discount if you do, but tell him I sent you. Oh, hey, speaking of discounts, Destroyer 1320, if you don't have your neutral safety cover from him yet, if you order it, put in discount code Mason and you'll get 15% off of your neutral safety switch cover thing. So it's the first time I've ever had a discount code. So get after it. It's pretty cool. But yeah, if you don't have it, order it up. And remember, if you're installing it and you've got the tamper-proof screws that come with it or bolts that come with it, remember, don't try to install them with any other fastener than the one that works for those particular fasteners. It could be anything. It could be star bits, square bits, could be the weird looking other ones that you get. There's all kinds of those that come in. Just make sure that when you get those, you install it with the correct fastener and bit, or when you install the fasteners, install it with the correct bit. You have to do that, or else you will be SOL. And remember, yes, those tamper-proof bits and pieces are always meant to be a little bit on the soft side, so if you try to tamper with them, it just galls it out. Gary, thank you very much, man. Saying, what about race bullets to replace mid-mufflers? Well, you got to remember, Gary, great question. Thank you very much for that super chat. The Hellcat factory system for the Challengers is basically that. It's more or less, it's a set of cherry bombs, basically. They're only about this long, or 2 3/4 inch pipe, and the whole thing is only that big around. They sound good. Let me tell you a system that I know that sounds good. In fact, it's a system that I wouldn't mind replicating on my car with one exception. So what it would be a 3-inch race bullet to replace your mids, and then a 1-foot race bullet to replace your resonators. That is a system that is extremely similar to a system that they used to sell for all cars, believe it or not, SC400 Lexuses. And it sounded freaking amazing. Now, the difference that I would employ if I were to do that to my car is I would remove the X pipe and put in an H pipe. That would drop the tone significantly. It sounds so much better with an H pipe. And you'll pick up a little bit of torque. It's something that I've never done with my car. But I can tell you, peak to peak, the H pipe almost always made more power, but partial throttle and overall power, the X pipe, it's about the same as the H. Sometimes it'll make a little bit more, but it doesn't really matter. You're really going for a sound here, and I can remember how those cars and how that system sounded in my head to this day, and that's the system that I would probably put in play with my car. And I think that would be a pretty slick deal. I'll give you another one that I did. So I had done on my E63, I did a mid-muffler delete on that car, but when I did the mid-muffler delete, I had an H-pipe welded in to that mid-muffler delete. It's the same floor plan, same footprint as a Charger. And I think one of the very first videos on my channel is that car on a dyno. And so that'll give you an idea what that thing sounded like at about 7,000 RPM. That car was a ripper with that 6.2 liter 4-valve engine. Yeah, that thing ran good. But thank you so very much, man. I appreciate that. And hopefully that answers your question. I mean, it's kind of a, the exhaust is such a subjective thing. But one of the things that you're going to do by removing that X pipe is it will deepen the tone, because what happens with an X is as those pulses are starting to come together, remember that they don't actually cross, okay? The reality is there's a laminar effect, and it doesn't really work like that. It does help at lower RPMs. The lower the RPM, the more you'll see some of that crossing. But the reality is that at higher RPMs, it doesn't really do that. It's almost like the incoming exhaust gases from one end cushion it, and they do kind of this thing. If you've ever seen one of the breakdowns of that, it's pretty fascinating. But what happens is as you have different pulses, you have the actual gas pulse that's coming down the pipe, as you would imagine, but you also have the sound pulse, and they're happening at the same time. They're exiting the cylinder. They're coming past the exhaust valve, I should say, to be more technical, at the same time, but one of them is traveling at the speed of sound, which is the sound of the thing, and the other one is traveling at the speed of whatever the exhaust gas is traveling at. One of those is a constant, and the other one is not. Constant, of course, would be the one that's traveling at the speed of sound. And so what happens is, at higher RPM, you are compressing the sound wave as it hits that X, and that's why you get the higher pitched shrill sound. Is because basically you're compressing that sound wave. And the H pipe is the exact opposite of that. The sound wave has more places to go. So it's basically going from a high volume or a small volume to a high volume, as opposed to having two basically same sized volumes coming together and crashing in that X. Kind of interesting stuff. I did a lot of exhaust testing. It's been forever and a day ago. But with my notchback Mustang, I tested everything. I tested X pipe, catalytic converter, H pipe. If there was something you could test, I tested with it. And so I was big into R&D back then, trying to get the most out of whatever I could get out of that little 302 that I had. And it was pretty crazy how many different exhaust systems I ended up testing. It was nuts. And what worked the best was old school H pipe. Gary's saying, hanging out with Joe, so I order many parts from MMX, great shop, but go with the Fast Man throttle body imported MMX intake, which I wholeheartedly agree. Gary's saying, I can show you the diff. Nice. Gary Fuller, what up? And again, thank you, Gary. I appreciate that a ton, buddy. And Gary's saying, yeah, I think I'm almost positive Gary got the last one. I was doing, at that point in time, I was doing manifolds for a few different shops, so. But I'm almost positive you got the last one that I did. Commercially available anyway. Every once in a while, I'll have somebody, that I just happen to know, and they're like, hey, can you help me out? Gary said, that was a headache. I know. No, it wasn't so much of a headache, bro. It was just, some of them are a little bit different, and you get going, and, you're just you go with the flow, and you're just kind of looking at it and measuring it. Like, so so first of all, when you bolt your throttle body on your intake manifold, always check to make sure that you don't have any kind of an encroachment from the manifold kind of sneaking up and popping up and looking at you, and then it's like totally gapped up here. Always make sure, always do. This is a big thing I see a lot of guys screw up on. This is the difference between you setting a record and not setting a record, by the way, is making sure that that thing is perfectly centered all the way across and all the way around. I will go in and I'm feeling this thing as I'm tightening it down. I'm back here with my fingers. I'm canoodling the hell out of this thing, just trying to make sure that everything is perfectly centered. And I will go through and I will check and I'll pull it apart and I'll check it again and I'll pull it apart and I'll adjust and I'll cut and I'll just and okay, is it cool? Are we cool yet? No, we're not cool. Damn it. So it's little goofy things like that that actually make the difference. And what I try to do with my manifolds is I try to make it to where when the throttle body is set, you just go, boop, put the throttle body on the manifold, that the natural way that the throttle body sits on the manifold is totally clean all the way around. Sometimes I can do that, sometimes I can't. Again, each one of those manifolds is a little bit different, and how the manifold is just where the bolts are can be a little bit off, believe it or not. It's all kinds of goofy stuff with those manifolds. But I will get in there. Hang on, let me get over here. More stuff. So my trusty metal metal ruler / deburring tool, by the way. But I get in there with, I've got every snap gauge you can find, right? Everybody that messes with these rocks this out. And I'm getting in there measuring, get my snap gauge measurement. So it's okay. Let me get my snap gauge measurement. Everything looks good. Go through and I check. Doing the spinny. Oh, rough spot. Get my Sharpie. All right, got a rough spot right here. Got a rough spot right here. Cut. Come back. Spinning. And that's what you got to do. That's the process. Cutty, spinny. Cutty, spinning. Anyway, that's the process. And again, some of them port themselves. I've had truck manifolds that I didn't do much more than just walk past the thing on the bench, and the whole thing just cleaned up beautifully. And I've had like quite a few of the truck manifolds have been like that. But man, the 6.4 manifolds, the 5.7 car manifolds are actually also pretty easy to play with too. The one thing I have not ever done, and I kind of regretted this, I don't know if you could get away with it, frankly. The car manifold's kind of weird where there's a tube. If you can imagine a plenum in space here, it has a tube that comes in because it's a front feed that comes into about halfway into that plenum. And I think what that's trying to do is that's trying to give the ambient air that's in the plenum something ambient to pull from, so that it's not dragging air that's, it's not like the air is rushing in to the manifold, because the cylinders are dragging in whatever air they can. But I think that what that does is it helps to create more of an ambient environment for the where that intake is opening. But I always thought if I could go in there and carve that thing out, if it would pick up any power. I doubt very seriously that it would. It probably would hurt power now that I'm thinking about it. Callis is asking, why do folks go with the Edelbrock manifold on a 6.4 when it's for a 6.1? There could be a few reasons. The Edelbrock manifold isn't a bad manifold. It's a very much improved version of the 6.1 liter. It delivers a very traditional looking power band. It'll pick up power through the mid-range over the stock manifold while still allowing to make about the same power up top. It won't eclipse it. Well, I say that, at least not with a stock car with a stock cam. Where that manifold does well is when you start messing with camshafts. The tighter the LSA you go, the more that manifold will enhance the power that thing makes. But for my money, I never saw a benefit for it. We use that manifold 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 4 or 5 times on 426 builds, and it worked great. I mean, it really did, but I still to this day feel like the stock manifold would have probably been just as equal to the task. I'll just say that. If nothing else, the drivability down low would have been better, because the stock manifold absolutely does drive better than that Edelbrock manifold. And keep in mind too, one other fun fact: the 5.7 manifold, it's about as good as a 6.1 manifold. Just note to self. 5.7 manifold's actually pretty good. Red Dog's in saying, what's up, Red Dog? Itch is asking, what kind of exhaust cutouts do you recommend for a Challenger, or do you not? Man, I don't really like exhaust cutouts, mainly because they don't really they just make noise, and they don't really ever sound that great. If you could mount them right after or right before the well, I wouldn't want to do it before. If you could mount them right after the catalytic converters, but even then it wouldn't do you a whole lot of good. If you could mount them there, they would sound better. But the problem that I've seen with exhaust cutouts is a lot of times they fail. So we had let me think. Actually, no, we had 2 cars. Had 2 cars where the cutouts failed. One of them was a Mustang, and a Mustang with cutouts is not good. That thing sounds really bad with cutouts. So I'm saying, okay, switch to PC. Nice. Saying, hit that like and subscribe. Chuck saying, I may just leave it alone. I tell you what, I would probably I left mine alone. My SRT, I never changed the exhaust on that car, except for pulling the cats off of it. I ended up putting them back on. Ryan's asking, what about the Corsa Extreme? The Corsa Extreme sounds good, but here's what I want to remind you of a couple of things. I love loud exhaust when the loud exhaust has the right tone, when it sounds good. It's a musical instrument, technically. When you start adding X pipes and X's and H's and all this other stuff, and different links and different resonators and things like that, you tune an exhaust just like a musical instrument. And if a musical instrument is flat, you can tell. It's just got that, it's got this flat, whiny sound to it. And a lot of times what'll happen with these extreme type exhausts is that they run an H pipe, they run an X pipe instead of an H pipe. And that has a tendency, if you've got very low restriction mufflers that don't have a lot of decibel drop, you end up with this real Mustang-y, bad sounding exhaust, as opposed to having an H or, a chamber like the old school Mustang power chamber exhaust systems. If any of you guys remember what those are or were, those things sounded unbelievable. And they also worked really well with chambered mufflers, which is another thing. Remember that if you have an X pipe, I don't recommend running a chambered muffler. That's a reflected wave. And remember, we're talking about wave tuning. Again, it's just like a musical instrument. You get into these exhaust systems, and what can happen is, and this is what I found when I was doing all the exhaust testing, what worked the best for an X pipe was any straight through muffler, where, one you can see through it, or one where it comes in and kind of goes off, but you can see through it, like our stock systems have. But if you ran, the worst performer was a Flowmaster chambered muffler with an X pipe. That combination, no matter what I tried, I could never get that combination to act right. It just ran horribly. And it, nearest I could figure, had something to do with reflective waves, reflected pulses hitting those chambers and bouncing back. At certain RPMs, you would just see the H pipe just running away from that combination, even with the same exact muffler, the same chambered muffler. So, man, that's going back a lot of years, though, at that testing. But you can see some of that testing in progress with a video. It might be the second video. No, it might be the first ever video that I posted might have been that my notchback on the dyno. So it's buried in that in the channel somewhere. And again, thank you, Gary. I appreciate the support, guys. I really do. Thank you. Someone saying nice. CryptoCat saying thanks. Gary Fuller saying thank you. Chuck saying if you look at the shorts on my channel, sometime I do a cold start note. Very nice. You ever wonder why the cold start's loud? Here's another fun fact for you guys. This happens with, and it's funny now because everybody goes cold start, cold start. Back in the day with carbureted cars, cold start just meant how did it act when it was cold? Does it start? Does it act right? That's all it meant. Well, with fuel injection and later fuel injection, really, the cold start is you fire it up and it's brap and it's really loud at startup. There's two things going on. One, it's in open loop. So in other words, it's going off of a predetermined set of parameters. And it's not looking at O2s yet. It's not warm enough to see the O2s and pay attention to them switching because it's in startup enrichment mode. But one of the fun facts on that is that the timing's retarded when you hit the starter button and you fire it up, and it stays that way until water temperature gets to a predetermined value. Typically somewhere could be around 150 degrees ish, right around in there. And you'll hear it. You'll hear the idle actually change. It'll get quieter. And what's happening is it's advancing the timing, which actually makes it quieter. And you might go, well, that makes no sense. Actually, let me explain it to you. So if you delay the spark, what happens is even though you're opening the exhaust valve at the same time, when you're idling, if you delay the spark, the time that it takes for the combustion event to take place, the same amount of combustion is trying to happen at a later time. So when the exhaust valve opens, you have more of an explosion happening out of the exhaust valve than you did if the exhaust were advanced. It's also heating up the O2s is what it helps to do, by the way. Heats up the O2s, heats up the catalytic converter, does all of that kind of stuff, as well as makes the car loud when you fire it up. So if you've ever wondered, why is the car why does it sound like that on a cold start? That's why. So hey, the more you know. Bandito is saying, what's the most reliable power adder for 5.7 turbo, Pro Charger, or Hellcat blower? Let's see. Turbo's a pain in the butt. I'll just leave it at that. Turbos they can be, I should say, from a packaging standpoint, not my cup of tea, but they will consistently make the most power out of the group. Pro Charger is probably the most reliable, mainly because it's easy on parts. It's very easy on the transmission. It's easy on axles, especially if you're not taking the thing to the drag strip. The Pro Charger really is kind of the best of all worlds. You can tune it as far as, putting how much boost you want through it, as far as how much power you want to make, but it's not a cluttered install the way that the turbos can be, but it's an easy install, easy to tune, and it's good overall. I mean, as long as you change the oil in the thing somewhat regularly, you'll have a car that's making about 100 more horsepower than you showed up to the party with, and it ain't bad. The only downside to the Pro Charger, though, is you wonder where your money's been spent. This is the downside to any centrifugal supercharger, because you are pushing all of your power and everything that you paid money for past 4,000 RPM. So you really only have about 2,000 RPM worth of playtime, and that's it. But again, you're rewarded with easier on parts, makes another 100 plus horsepower, so you got that. And it's easy to sell. If you decide you want to go back to stock, you can convert the thing back to stock and sell it. It's a lot easier to do with that kit. Now, if you want to go with the Hellcat blower, MMX, we're talking about MMX, they do make a kit to convert your 5.7 or 6.4 to a Hellcat supercharger. I will tell you this, that is the best way to go, but it's also the hardest on parts. It's the most fun to play with, but it's not, it can be expensive, and it's cumbersome, and it's heavy. So it's a fun street combination, but if I'm going to be spending the money and I'm going to pick one kind of combination, one combination out of all of them, for me, it's going to be a Pro Charger. Mainly because it's softer on parts. It'll have the top end rush that you're looking for. It's kind of more of a traditional, like if you're used to Fox bodies with Vortex, or, you remember, reading about some of the Shelby cars with the Paxton ball drive centrifugal superchargers. Those are all of the same value, if you will. World War II, all those engines had centrifugal superchargers. They were really big centrifugal superchargers. So you can tune them for whatever altitude you're at too, which makes them kind of nice. It's kind of like having a turbo, but more linear, if you will. I like them. Oh, Cyrus, if you're watching this stream from a mobile device, please take the moment out of the chat, hit the like button and subscribe and ring the bell. Then come on back in. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Chuck saying, I know that you already know what my H-pipe note sounds like. It's all good. I love it. Yeah, don't forget, if you guys are new to the chat, by the way, please consider subscribing. It helps a lot. Oh, Gary, yeah, so you may have sold off the one that I sent to be ported that you cut through. Yeah, that one had a real thin, man, that sucked too, because that was a good one. Actually, no, that one went back to the shop. But he said, I know the one you sent me was the last one you took as a job. That is correct. And that was I got the brand new manifold ordered in for you, buddy. That was a good ass manifold. Damn. So that manifold, that was yours. So that manifold that was the last manifold I did for that shop. So that manifold ported nice. That was, okay, so I'll put it to you like this. Your manifold ported about as well as Quick Brick's manifold ported, which was a real nice one. His original manifold that I ported for him. So yeah, very cool. In fact, yours, I think I actually backfilled it also. Yours is backfilled, but I didn't cut through it, but it's backfilled just mainly to absorb heat while I'm going through there and cutting polymer. So you can always tell my manifolds, especially my later manifolds, because I always backfill them. And I even go through I'll tape it all up, and I'm pretty meticulous with it. Sand everything down before I get in there and start doing stuff. But yeah, your original one was a real thin casting. What was weird is that your original one, that's right. Yours was a thin casting, but it had a small, okay. So one of the weird things about some of the manifolds that I get, they're all a little bit different. The snouts to the superchargers, I'm pointing, you can see like through the wall back here. The snouts on the superchargers can be different also. But your manifold was a thin casting, but it was also kind of small. The opening in those manifolds is usually like somewhere around 81 millimeters, typically. And that'll give just enough room if you put a throttle body on the thing where you don't usually have a lip. But Gary's original manifold, if it's the one I'm thinking of, that one was small. It was like 79 millimeters. It was small, and it was a thin casting type. It's weird. Anyway, or was it thick? Shit, now I'm starting to get them mixed up because it was right there at the very end. I did a whole bunch of manifolds at the very end right there. And I think yours I know I spent a bunch of time reshaping yours. Maybe yours was small with a thick casting. That was the second one was small with a thick casting. The first one was small with a. Second one was the right size with a thick casting. The first one was small with a thin casting, I think. Golly, it's been, I don't know. I've gone through so many of those things. Joe's saying manifold throttle body mounting sounds like a job for a jig. Kind of, but the problem is that just like what I was talking about with Gary's manifold, they're all a little bit different. Now, the good thing is that you've got about this much room where the throttle body bolts on to the manifold. You've got about that much room to play with. Actually, it's about this much. You got about this much room to play with where you can cut that plastic to where everything fits just right. But I always did it by hand, and it usually worked out just fine. It doesn't take that long to get it right. You just don't want to get real aggressive with it. Crypto's asking, would there be any benefits to a Hellcat exhaust on a 5.7? Yeah, I mean, there are guys that were taking the 6.1 liter manifold / Hellcat / 6.4 liter manifold and coupling that with the full takeoff stuff that guys would go put a different full exhaust on their car. They would sell the manifold, the cat pipe, and the cat back, and guys would buy that and put it on their RTs. Sounds good. But here's the thing: the later RTs have that scat pack exhaust. They just need the manifolds. SCW, I have no experience with the Sniper throttle body, but I can tell you that unless it's going on a Hellcat, it's not going to do you much good. And even then, if it goes on a Hellcat, it ain't going to do you much good. So, okay, we're talking about the 6.4 stuff, right? Y'all are going to love this. So, my car's snout. So, the snout on the supercharger is where your throttle body bolts onto it, basically. My snout is actually kind of big for a stock snout. It's never been touched, but it's actually larger than a red eye that I was trading back and forth a throttle body. And I was doing throttle body testing on my car versus, which is a stock boost Hellcat, versus a red eye with a 275 upper. And what we found is that on my car, the 95 did nothing for it. And when I put it on the red eye, the opening was smaller than my car on the snout, and it was smaller by just enough to where it made putting the throttle body on the thing, it triggered every OCD thing that I've got, because it took forever to get that throttle body to line up. And it was the 95 millimeter, and I was just trying to get it. Finally, like you tighten it a little bit, it kind of kinks over, and then you tighten it, get it snug, and you check it, and it's so you got to get everything kind of sort of loose, and you're like ding ding ding, like tapping on it, and you're trying to get it just right. Whereas my car, I could just put the thing on there, and it didn't really give me a problem. So again, it gets back into making sure that, because there's manufacturing tolerances for all of this stuff, guys, and that's really more the value of what I'm trying to convey to you, is that everything is so different. And when you're working with this stuff, and millimeters matter. I mean, millimeter is a huge amount of material. You might think, it's a millimeter. Yeah, but when you're cutting material, it's actually a lot. And I can't explain to you how much it is, other than say it's actually a lot. And I've seen them vary by as much as a full millimeter and change. And talking about the manifolds. And so the snout that I was playing with, I mean, that was about 0.5 millimeter, but it was just enough to where it would create a little ridge. And you don't want that. You want everything to be smooth. If anything, you'd rather that the hole that you're bolting this thing to, you'd rather that hole was bigger so you don't have a ledge or anything like that. So yeah, the worst case scenario is to bolt the thing up and you've got like a little peaker like this. That sucks. But it's crazy. Yeah, there's so many. When you get into working with this stuff, you find out, guys, there is a lot of manufacturer tolerance that you're going to end up playing with in there. So I was saying, hit the like and subscribe. Thank you, buddy. Hey, Michael's saying, so I finally did it. I traded my 2018 TA Challenger for a 2023 Sublime Green Challenger Hellcat. Congratulations. Got him in jailbreaks and had a blast driving around today. Very cool. They're nice cars, man. I love them. Well, congratulations. I love it. What made you decide to make the change? Well, I get it's a Hellcat, but hopefully you got a good deal on it. Ryan saying, love the old school glass packs. They do sound good. Joe saying Mustangy. Yeah. Chuck saying, if I ever get a kitty at the 392 staying in my driveway, love it too much to let it go. Man, I'll tell you what, there are times, more often than you might think, that I do miss having my scat, where I say scat pack, it was actually an SRT, where I do miss having that car. And I miss it because it was so much usable power. And that's why I liked it so much. Now, that being said, I can just put the Hellcat into 500 horse mode, although it is in street trans when you do that. Not that it's a big deal, but I really do. There are times where I miss it. I can say that for sure. Just so much usable power. And it's an 11-second car. They're not slow. That's the other thing. They're torquey, they're big, they're comfortable. And there is not another car that competes with it. I know a lot of people compare it to Mustangs and Camaros and stuff like that, but I mean, you kind of can't do that. It's like, to put it in a different way, if you're looking at old school cars, you have to remember that the Challenger was never a competitor with the Mustang. I mean, yeah, they raced against each other in SCCA competition, but on the street, it was up against the Cougar. The Challenger was never a Mustang competitor. That was the Cuda. But the Challenger was a little bit bigger car, just like the Cougar was a little bit bigger car than the Mustang. And, more of a bigger, more comfortably sprung car, right? And so when people compare the Challenger to the Mustang, it's like, dude, you don't understand. Do you realize that you could fit a Mustang comfortably within the shell of a Challenger? They're completely different size cars. They're completely different ways of going about moving down the road. I've always liked the bigger body car. I mean, ever since I was a kid, I don't know what it is, except for the AC Cobra, I was always extremely drawn to the bigger bodied cars. I wasn't really a Mustang guy or a Camaro guy, but I was a Buick GNX guy. I was a Roadrunner guy. I was that guy. I always liked those. In fact, it's funny, there was a dude that I don't know where he came from. He just moved into a house like a few blocks from where I live, and he's got a Cutlass convertible. And it's one of these things where it's like, man, that was the car that I wish I had in college. That would have been, like, I always liked that type of a car, just a bigger car. I don't know, always did a little bit more for me. Sovereign's asking, if I'm not mistaken, it was Modern Red. Yeah, Modern Red, who put the Pro Charger on his RT. Yep. Car runs good, too. I mean, it's a legit 10-second car. Yeah, in fact, Modern Red's car runs really good. Moto X is asking, didn't Formula One develop exhaust technology to use smaller engines? I'm sure they did. Sovereign saying centrifugal hair dryers trademark. True that. More like turbines. Yeah. They do saying, thank you, you're awesome. Well, thank you, man. I appreciate it. I don't know if I'm awesome, but hopefully I help. Someone's asking, what do you think about that 66 AC going for $1.3? Listen, dude, I I can't imagine. So here's the funny thing. Okay, that's a lot of money, but Shelby's and AC stuff has been going for big money for a long time. Now, here's a car that is right now making my head hurt. And I haven't gone any deeper than looking at Gen 2s. But Vipers, GTSs in particular, Gen 2s, they're not worth the money. They're terrible cars. I've had 3 of them. In fact, there's me doing a burnout in one of them right there. That's my 99 ACR. It's the price on those things has gone absolutely nuts. And I remember when they were practically disposable. I haven't paid any attention to Gen 3, 4, or whatever. I haven't seen any of the later ones, but man, I was just sniffing around and the prices are just absolutely nuts. So yeah. Moto X saying F1s used to scream. Yeah, they did. Our folks saying, what's up, Mopar nerds? How's it going tonight? It's going good. Moto X saying shop talk for sure. Crypto Cat saying, appreciate it, sir. I got the flex. Gary's asking if anybody's heading to the Mopar shootout next month in Rockingham. I am not, unfortunately. My schedule will not allow for that right now. Joseph's got Love Shack going on in the background. I like it. Chuck saying Super B Cornet. Love me some Super B. So I guess, you know what? I think my love for the big body stuff, I don't really know where it comes from. I was just stuff that I've always been attracted to. I don't know why I always liked the bigger cars, but I did. Sorry, saying, damn, so no Hurricane Vipers for the channel anytime soon. I tell you what, if I did, it would not be a Gen 2. And I'll tell you the reason why I wouldn't do a Gen 2. First of all, I just would not want to have to suffer through dealing with that clamshell hood. That thing is a nightmare, and if anything goofy happens to it, it's $1 Brazilian. I would probably look at a Gen 3 or really a Gen 4 would be where I would focus. Damn, somebody had a sweet sounding diesel that just blew through. That would be where I would focus my my efforts, I think, in trying to find a donor. The thing is that those are a little bit harder to come by because they actually have decent suspension geometry they handle. And so they don't end up wadding their owners up the way that the Gen 2s did. So again, trying to find a Gen 2 that's worth even talking about is tough. But yeah, I would probably not be a player with a Gen 2. Really more looking like Gen 3, Gen 4 for me anyway. But I'm trying to think what else is going on with the cars. I mean, really nothing. Like I said, I did the thermostat. In fact, oh godly. Okay, y'all are going to love this. So if you've never done the thermostat on a Hellcat, there's really nothing to it. I have a TBA machine extension on my car, mainly because I didn't like, just in general, I never did like how close the radiator hose was to the pulley itself. And so I got the TBA machine deal. It kind of brings the hose out a little bit, clocks it down a little bit. I kind of like that. Well, you torque those to 21 foot-pounds, and 21 foot-pounds doesn't seem like a lot, except you have to remember that you're playing with a steel fastener going into a bit of aluminum. And so there's always that, oh my God, am I going to take all the threads out with it? I always put anti-seize on there, never thread locker of any kind. And anyway, I put anti-seize on it. So it's just going, God, is this thing going to strip? Anyway, get the thing off of there. And there's two bolts that hold it on to the adapter, which is the thing that extends it. And then that's held on with, I think it's a number 5 star bit, or I'm sorry, number 5. What is that thing? Anyway, it's a hex head. And the problem with that is that it's also torqued to 21 foot-pounds. And so it's like, God, if this thing strips, I'm SOL. So what I really need to do is I need to order some new bolts from TBA Machine and just have them ready to go in case I need to do a thermostat again on this car. I've got a set of new bolts ready to go. I'm not worried about them coming off. It's just, anyway, long story short, so, I did the whole trick where you put the bag underneath the housing and all of that. And when I go to, I'm getting everything off the car and I pop the housing off and a little bit of coolant comes out. Very, very little. Hellcats do not bleed hardly at all when you do thermostats on them. So, and I mean, way less than what's in this water bottle here. Even less than that comes out of there. Maybe that much. Maybe about that much. And so it's all in the little baggie and I'm going, okay, cool. And I go to reach for it to kind of pick it up and move it out of the way. And of course it falls. All right. So baggie with about that much coolant falls. And the car's not on ramps at this point. And by the way, the thumbnail, the car's on ramps because I put the car on ramps to pull the inspection cover off of it so I could clean everything out after I drove the car. There was still some like residue from where this bag fell down. And so the bag falls, splat, coolant goes everywhere. I'm going, screw it. It is what it is. So then I go to get the thermostat off. Now remember, I have to take the adapter off to get the thermostat off. And so I go to pull this thing out of there. And the thing is, it's a thermostat, right? Like you've seen one, you may have even swapped one of these out before. Here's the thing. I'm kind of prying on it a little bit with my wrench. I'm just like, all right, come on, let go. And I just put a little bit of wrist into it, just get out of there. And it pops. Thing pops off, bounces off of something, comes up in the air, and then falls down into the middle of nothing. Now, keep in mind, the car's still not on ramps or anything like that. So let me paint the picture for you. I've got a baggie that had about that much coolant in it, splat all over the inspection cover. And now the thermostat is run off to, at this point, parts unknown. It just vanished, ghosted on me. So anyway, it was at that point I decided to take a break and came back to it and got it all knocked out. But yeah, it was pretty funny. It was spotless right before it became a complete disaster. So isn't that how it normally works? I just went, it does happen. Oh, Joe's saying Belvedere GTX. Thank you, circa 1967. Yeah. Summer's liking the B-body. Like I was saying, I still have a 2018 392 Charger Daytona, so I ain't going to miss much at all. Best of both worlds. Good car, by the way. Chuck's asking, 446 pack, 426 Hemi, or 383? Chuck's saying, I've driven both cars with all three in it, and I like the 426. Let me throw another one in there. So, 446 pack, or can I throw in either 426 or 440 with max wedge heads and intake? That's probably my favorite out of all of them. The cars that I had dynoed, the max wedge cars were always my favorite because the guys would take those old max wedge heads, which back then for Mopars was big money, but they have their own dedicated intake manifolds too. But max wedge heads that were ported, intake manifold, port match to the heads, made every bit as much power, if not more, than the Hemis in some cases. But they had all the partial throttle hit that the 440s had. So that was there. I like believe it or not, the 383 cars are kind of fun, but they are not fast. I will put it to you this way. In fact, the one that got away, the sunflower yellow Roadrunner was a 383 car. And I mean, you would never say that it was fast. They're torquey, but it was, in fact, it was a lot like driving Sierra. There's a lot of torque, just not a lot of horsepower. Or if it was tuned right, you could get a decent amount of torque out of it. But they had, it was a passenger car intake manifold. It's a low deck type of deal. It's not a high performance engine by any stretch. The fact that it was rated at 375 horsepower, or rather three and a quarter horse. I'm sorry, that's the 440 is rated 375, which it didn't make. But the 383s were even the 3.25 horse cars. They were good running cars. They just lots of tip-in torque, which is what Dodges are known for. I mean, Dodges are known for that immediate tip-in throttle response, which is why the 440 cars did so well. That if we're only talking about the commercially available, more readily available, I should say, cars like the 440, the wedge combinations, or rather, I should say the wedge combinations don't come into play with that. We're only talking about the 440. I really like the 440, but man, I'll tell you what, the problem that I have with the 440 versus the Hemi, this is such a hard deal. So the 440s that I drove, those were all really good because, it was immediate tip-in throttle response, which you would expect. If you've ever seen one torn apart, they really are. It's like having a big block displacement with like mediocre performance, like not smog era stock, but like warmed over stock small block heads. But they've got so much tip in. And you all know I've talked about this before, but if you look at port velocity, that's just the speed of the air that's going through that port. A 440 at 4,700 RPM has the same port velocity as a Hemi 426 head would have at, keep in mind, putting them on the same displacement, just in terms of volume, at 6,200 RPM. So it's like having the same port velocity on a 426, which is a smaller engine, at like 6,400 RPM, which tells you that the 440, when the 440 is done, that's where the 426 actually starts to work. I like them both. When the 426 is done right, it's a fun car. The 426 with a 5-speed with an overdrive is a really good car. The only downside, though, is living with it. I know a lot of guys, I say a lot, every one of the guys that I was dealing with, this is, again, forever ago. This is back in the late 90s, by the way. I think they had just released the 426, like they re-released the Hemi. At some point, I know these guys had picked up on that. Some were hotter versions than others. Guys would, hot rod them, make whatever kind of power they wanted. But the problem that you ran into was even the stock ones were a little bit lazy down low. So I can see why so many people would go for a 440 versus a 426. They're just so much snappier to drive. But yeah, the 426, if you can ring it out, the 426 is going to be a lot of fun. Chuck saying, I think they made a limited edition 70 Challenger with a 426. They would make as many as you wanted to buy. You could get a 70 Challenger with a 426, get a 70 or 71 CUDA also with a 426. The real rare stuff was, well, there was only one that made it out into the world, was the ball stud Hemi, which would have been the replacement to the Hemi and would have made the Hemi more or less like the Mark IV big block that you would be familiar with from Chevrolet, 396, 454, 427 family. The I don't know. The funny thing about the, talking about the big block cars, if I just saw your comment say you like the 426 better for throttle response, 440 is great too. When you pipe up a 426, they can get rowdy. The 440, like I say, it's the 440 is just an interesting engine because it's like it was never really made to be a high performance engine. It just kind of found its way into that role. Okay, so at one of the Mopar Fest, and this kind of stinks because the Mopar Fest stuff was old school muscle was few and far between. There was a dude though that was basically pitted with us at one of the Mopar Fest deals. I say pitted with us. He was actually, technically, he was under my awning thing that sits right over here. He ended up having an issue. We were trying to help him work through it. But 440, but again, the same combination I was telling you guys about. Ported max wedge heads, max wedge intake, the whole bit. Big cam car, that was about a 650 horsepower engine. And so you could definitely get there if you have the right heads. It's just an air pump at that point. But yeah, I really liked the wedge stuff a lot. And the bummer about the 420, here's the thing, the 426, okay, so if you build a 426 and you do it right, you're going to have a minimum of 11.5 or 12-to-1 compression with that thing. The problem with that is that now you're dealing with this big old dome, and there is you can run into issues if you've got a big domed piston just with getting the gas out of the cylinder. It makes it more convoluted, but getting it in is not a problem. There's a lot of areas where like you almost have to go absurd with a Hemi to get it to act right at low RPM. And you got to go real high compression. You got to do a lot of funny things with a Hemi to get them to act right at low RPM. And I say act right, it's just, if you've got a Hemi, you want to spin that thing. You want to make a lot of horsepower with it. And to do that, you're giving up so much drivability. And it's just the way that the heads, it's a tumble port head. They take big gulps of air, but it's very slow. Chuck said, I wish the ball stud made it out there in production. That would have been so sick. Because let me tell you something, if the ball stud would have actually made it into production, you'd have seen ball stud Hemi, okay, engines in trucks, dump trucks, passenger cars, everywhere. Everything would have had a Hemi in it. It'd have been a pretty cool engine. I guess it wasn't going to pass a mission. I don't know what the deal was with that thing. But the Mark IV is kind of a semi-Hemi. There's all kind. You get into the Mark IV and the big blocks, and everybody wanted to try to jump on that Hemi bandwagon. Oh, Wolverine saying, yeah, I heard about it from RT Life, and I'm just happy that they are finally looking into other options than going electric. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I missed a comment about e-fuel. The Wolverine saying, thoughts on Stellantis looking into e-fuel. So e-fuel is not anything new. If you have hydrogen, if you have carbon, really in the form of carbon dioxide, you can make gasoline. It's just a component. It's just elements at that point, making up molecules. But here's the problem. The problem with e-fuel is that you've got to create a system that makes it to where it is efficient and cost effective. One of the problems with e-fuels is that it's the same problem with electrolysis. Okay. Why don't we talk about hydrogen, right? Why don't you get hydrogen and oxygen from water? Wouldn't it be easy to get all this hydrogen from water. I mean, you got all this oceans, all that hydrogen's there, right? Well, don't be so quick, because that is an incredibly strong bond between hydrogen and oxygen in the water. That you can break those bonds more easily with natural gas. And that's actually where a lot of the hydrogen comes from, is from natural gas. So you're going, okay, well, crap. Okay, so I got natural gas, which is already a fuel. If I break that down and get hydrogen out of it, or I try to put together a synthetic blend and you've got these, component parts, it takes so much more energy to make the gas than it would be to just use whatever it is that you were basically chopping up to make the gas, to use that as the fuel itself. So there are ways to do it, don't get me wrong, but it's just, you would almost be better off. This is going to sound kind of nutty, but you would almost be better off just running everything straight ethanol the way that Brazil did. They go E85, E90, some E50, some gasoline, but primarily it's some heavily alcohol derived blend that they're running in those cars. And that's, because it's sustainable. You can just make alcohol, right? So you'd be better off going that direction. And if you're trying to recapture and reintroduce carbon, that's the way to do it. And use the alcohol that you make from the corn that you grow and repurpose and reuse that carbon, as opposed to trying to go other directions and get real creative with how you can make a fuel. But the problem is you're exposing yourself to what is in essence a fairly significant energy deficit to make the product that you're making. And remember that the problem is they keep forgetting that gasoline is actually a very efficient use of a product, of a natural resource. So, in fact, after distilling, you get more gasoline out of a barrel of oil than the oil that you had before. This is because of the distillation process, though. Oh, hang on. Ahmed saying, Hy-Vee May saying, what do you think about the stock rear suspension on the Charger Chalice? Love it. I feel like the bushings are too soft, thinking going all polys. What are your thoughts on performance gains? You won't see anything. Matter of fact, so I put Spawn trailing arms, camber arms, and control arms, or they got all kinds of arms underneath there. It's independent rear suspension. One of the issues that I had with that was that it was, number one, it was noisy. And if you go into my how-tos video, you'll see everything that I did to install those and make them as quiet as I could. If there was a performance gain, I don't remember it being all that great. There could be some slight performance gain to it, but it ended up, it wasn't really all that. I mean, I'm not running any different suspension bits on my car, and it does really good. But good question, though. A lot of guys have asked that. About the only thing I can think of that might do you some good would be, like I said, a BMR trailing arms. In fact, those things practically install themselves. So, I mean, I don't even have cradle lockouts on mine. Never needed them. In fact, we never put cradle lockouts on anything, if I'm being honest. But we also weren't running a whole lot of like mid 8-second cars. But OX is saying, spoke last night with buddy who dropped a 426 aiming at 70 Charlie. You got irate with me bugging him for not driving it. Been sitting in his garage for over 20 years. What a waste. Yeah. Especially if it's not a numbers matching car. A lot of guys, see, this is where, man, Mopar guys get weird. You talk about drinking the freaking Kool-Aid. It's just an engine. It's nothing special. I hate to break this to a lot of these folks, but I mean, you're talking about a Hemi, okay? Big deal. They were used as industrial. What people don't remember is that Chrysler Industrial Group had Hemis that they used for water pumps, air raid sirens, air pumps. You used them in everything basically. It's just a cylinder head configuration. That's it. It's a good one, but there's a lot of good ones. And again, Hemis are fantastic. But any head that flows well is fantastic. The Hemi is just a cheap and easy way to get a good flowing cylinder head. And don't be fooled. The reality of a hemispherical cylinder head is that they are highly volumetrically efficient, but they are the worst at being thermodynamically efficient. In other words, they can bring in a lot of air. You can compress it, but they're not very thermodynamically efficient. In other words, getting the power extracted because you have a heavier piston. You have the dome to have any kind of compression to it, which means you've got exhaust flow potential issues there. There's all kinds of hangups with the Hemi head, just like there's a lot of benefits. And so that's why wedge heads are so popular. It's not because they're more or less efficient or more or less expensive. It has nothing to do with that. You can cheaply make Hemi heads. People did it a lot. But the point of this is that the wedge is more thermodynamically efficient, and you can put a big old port on a wedge head. You can make a wedge head bring in air and act like a Hemi head. Matter of fact, semi-Hemis or canted valve heads do exactly that. Your Boss 302, Boss 351, any of the Mark 4, 5, 6, 450, well, not 6, Mark 4 or 5 big blocks. Same exact thing. Chuck saying my buddy's 426 isn't so great just cruising around slow. I tend to push it more than the 440. Oh, yeah. Well, it's there. I mean, you got to, right? He said, then I get back in my 392 and say, comfort again. Yes. And you have all the power, too. Donnie's saying, I'm late, but what's up, everyone? Talking about a little bit of everything. Sovereign's talking about e-fuels created with nuclear fusion. Well, the problem there, again, I mean, it's the raw material that you're dealing with. You're still using a quote unquote fossil fuel to create your e-fuel. And so the only way that it would not be necessary, I mean, the only way that the inefficiencies of hydrolysis, or rather electrolysis using water, the only way that those efficiencies would be really legitimately like justifiable would be if you were running fusion or nuclear or something like that. Something that didn't have its own primary emissions that you had to deal with. Oh, Chuck's saying that 426 car is badass the way it's set up and not great every day. Yeah. I take a dump after driving it, I bet. But I said my buddy is a Hemi hoarder. Oh, Sovereign saying May's almost here, meaning Black Ghost is getting closer to the auction block. That's right. It probably will get 7. Somebody is gonna bite on the nostalgia of that car, and it'll pull a pretty big number. I mean, I would be interested to see what kind of dollar figure that car is drawn right now just to be part of the advertising, because that's got to be relatively significant, I would think. Ahmed saying 16392 Challenger 8-speed SRT having issues with a lot of wheel hop on low speed. Watt. Check your tire pressure first. Replace trailing arms, still no change. Any solution? Diff brakes. Diff brakes can help. Look at your tire pressure. Make sure you're not trying to cheat the tire pressure down. Typically, I mean, you're looking at 32 PSI as a minimum on the street will help to mitigate some of that wheel hop. But a diff brace can help that also. But check the tire pressure first. Someone saying Chuck's got the car. Someone saying could go over a mil. Yep. I like that one. Got the little red car. And somebody's got their radio cranked up. So Sovereign seeing thinking Leno might grab it. I don't know. It would be kind of a, I don't know, man. I mean, I would like, it'd be cool if Leno got it, but I just don't know of anybody else that would maybe do the car justice. But then again, I don't know that Leno, I don't know if it fits Leno's MO necessarily. You'd almost have to go to like a dedicated Mopar guy. Oh, Gary's saying, with mine being a manual, I love the white line bushing for the lower trailing arm to the hub bushing and the white line bushing for the cradle for the lower arm. That might be a good way to go. I know a lot of guys like those white lines. Chuck said, oh, wedge heads are badass because of the potential for sure. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Sovereign saying, yep. Chuck's heading out. Good seeing you, brother. Cheers. Sovereign saying, good night, Chuck. Let's see. Ahmed saying, I saw your video on cold air intake. I actually did a dyno stock versus Mopar cold air versus Charge Performance carbon fiber, our brand. Mopar gained 3 horsepower, our 6-inch carbon intake gain 8.5. Not bad for cold air. Not bad at all. Unfortunately, just didn't ever see the change at the track. You guys remember I did all the testing with the JLT and ended up setting the record with the stock intake, which is crazy. Chuck's out saying, catch you on the next one. See you, brother. Someone saying, salute. What do I say? Laters. But, yeah, I just wanted to, I just wanted to say thanks to all you guys, by the way, for being on the show tonight. I really do appreciate it. Thank y'all so much for the support. It means a ton, guys. But once again, before I wrap it up, here's that old Reich thermostat. And again, this one, I don't know why I didn't. There's got to be a reason. I can't remember what it would have been that I didn't do the drill the holes thing in this one. Anyway, this is the one I ended up pulling out. This would have been the stock one out of that car. Oh, another fun fact. Hold on. Hang on. So if you ever pick up a thermostat and you're like, what kind of thermostat is it? If you look inside of that hole right there, and I don't think it's going to focus, you will see that it will tell you exactly what it is. And in this case, it's upside down. You'll see this one says 203 at the top. That's 203 degrees. Now, I don't know what the 214B is. It doesn't make any sense. But this one, if I can find it, here we go. You'll see where it says 82 degrees Celsius, 180 degrees Fahrenheit. So if you look in the very back here, you might need to get a magnifying glass, make sure the light hits it just right. You can see that. Another one This one you probably will be able to see. That Reich. I don't know if it's going to focus. You can see where it says 170. Same thing, right at the very bottom of that thermostat. Anyway, another way you can tell, just want to make sure you guys have that knowledge on board. Fun factoid for you. It's on more than one occasion, you're sitting there, you're messing with these things, you don't remember which one is which. That way you know. So we're saying, thanks everyone. Oh yeah, thank you for hitting the like button too, guys. Thank y'all so much. Gary Fuller saying, love you, B. Thank you, Gary. Appreciate that, brother. And guys, with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. I'm going to wrap up the car too. But listen, guys, appreciate every one of you guys. Thank you so much for the support. Love each and every one of y'all, man. Would not do this without you. And guys, remember, get out there and do something cool for somebody, because chances are they need it way more than you know. And with that, guys, I'm going to wrap it up. We will catch y'all on the next one. Thanks again. That's a wrap. Adios.